unbelievable. But the Caitlin Clark stalker is only getting a total of 2 years on this, and they're already giving him credit for time served. Caitlin Clark's stalker was handed a lenient sentence on Monday after pleading guilty to stalking and harassment. Michael Lewis, 55, was charged with stalking back in January.
You won't believe what happened in the WNBA world just now. One of the most eerie and startling events in Caitlin Clark's career came to a dramatic end. Clark is a superstar rookie who has been breaking records and bringing insane attention to women's basketball. For stalking and harassing her, a 55-year-old guy from Texas, yes, 55, was given a 2.5-year prison sentence. This man wasn't merely sending strange texts. Instead, believing he was in some sort of fictitious relationship with her, he went into full stalker mode, sending hundreds of threatening and sexually graphic texts and even going across states.
To transmit an obscene message or indecent or no judgment. Good luck, and I hope not to see you back here. But if you get it done, since I found they will file a petition.
Even worse, he continued as if nothing could stop him when cops confronted him. The WNBA community was rocked by the arrest of Michael Lewis, a 55-year-old man from Denton, Texas, which reads like a real crime novel. Imagine this. As a rising star in her favorite sport, Caitlin Clark is dedicated to inspiring millions of people and shattering records. Behind the scenes, a terrible situation is taking place. She begins to get hundreds of messages over the course of many weeks, which is an overwhelming deluge. These weren't only arbitrary remarks made by a frantic admirer. They were so frightening, sexually explicit, and upsetting that anyone would be afraid to look at their phone. Even worse, this man wasn't confined to a screen. Lewis made the decision to intensify his fixation, making the long journey to Indianapolis and wandering around the city where Clark plays and resides. His messages' IP addresses were initially traced by police to a hotel in downtown Indianapolis and even a public library. Yes, exactly. He was continuing to annoy her by logging in from public places. And his words were astounding when the officers eventually came up to him. He claimed to be in a fictitious relationship with Caitlin Clark.
Take a moment to process that.
This was more than just misguided fan worship. This was a complete misconception that had the potential to develop into something even more harmful. Because it demonstrated that even one of America's most adored athletes is vulnerable to maniacal stalkers, his arrest caused a stir. The league as a whole, along with supporters and teammates, were rendered incoherent. Just how near this man was to possibly doing actual harm.
WNBA did nothing to stop it. It was all pacer sports and entertainment. And there was a lot of I remember there was a lot of really weird things in the WNBA media when they were like, some of like the bad actors in WNBA media were as good as saying that Caitlin Clark should, you know the people that demand Caitlin Clark speak on everything, they demanded Caitlin Clark speak on this topic here, and I'm like, this is...
Michael Lewis's courtroom scenes were not your typical dull legal proceedings. Rather, they were a crazy, twisted spectacle that you would expect to see in a movie rather than in real life. No, everyone in attendance was astounded by this circus of obsession and delusion. People were hoping that Lewis would at last express regret, or at the very least behave like a guy facing serious accusations when he walked into the courtroom. Instead, he performed for everyone, demonstrating the true unhingedness of the situation. The evidence was presented by the prosecutors in graphic detail. Caitlin Clark was the target of hundreds of threats and graphic communications. The time frame was horrifying. Beginning in the middle of December, Lewis began to harass her nonstop, often sending dozens of texts in a single day. The abuse quickly intensified, and most people would assume that he would frighten someone straight when the cops first performed a welfare check on him. Lewis, however, did not. He disregarded it and carried on as if nothing had occurred. Then the incident occurred that caused the courtroom to freeze. Lewis started talking wildly about the end of the world and alerted everyone to the imminence of some cataclysmic disaster. It seemed unreal. Picture yourself sitting in a courtroom with a man who stalked a WNBA star now talking like a doomsayer. This was more than just unsettling. It demonstrated a total disassociation from reality, which made it quite frightening. It seemed that Lewis was still not really comprehending the seriousness of what he had done, even as the judge imposed his 2.5-year prison sentence. In addition, he was prohibited from attending any Indiana Fever and Pacers games, from approaching Gainbridge Fieldhouse or Hinkle Fieldhouse, and from contacting Caitlin Clark in any manner. Additionally, he will not be able to use the internet while serving his sentence, which would eliminate the very means by which he tortured her. As the courtroom witnessed all of this, it became clear that justice was not being done. This was a last-ditch effort to keep Clark safe from a man who lived in a perilous fantasy world. The fans left with a lingering thought. What might have happened if the system hadn't detected him in time? Let's discuss the real messages that Michael Lewis sent to Caitlin Clark in case you thought the plot couldn't get any darker.
He has also been required to stay away from the Fever and Pacer games, while the judge recommended he receive mental health treatment. Make asylums great again. Lewis, who previously told cops he was in an imaginary relationship, Jesus, with the women's basketball sensation, will also be prohibited from having internet access during his sentence.
These weren't lighthearted fan comments or casual DMS. These were the messages that would make your spine tingle. Messages that give you the impression that someone is keeping an eye on you and is only waiting for the right opportunity to present itself. Caitlin received hundreds of texts and messages on social media over the period of several weeks, many of which were extremely upsetting, threatening, and sexually explicit. He wasn't merely expressing his admiration for her. He was expressing unequivocally his claim to her time, attention, and even life. Those texts contained language that no young woman, or anyone for that matter, should ever have to read. The scariest part, though, comes next. Lewis wasn't content to remain hidden behind his keyboard. In fact, he traveled to Indianapolis. In his deranged mind, he wandered the metropolis where Caitlin lives and plays, thinking that she was waiting for him or that they were involved in some made-up romance. If left unchecked, this type of behavior has the potential to turn tragic. Every athlete is aware of trolls and haters on the internet, but when someone physically appears close to your home court, it takes things to a whole new level of horror. Instead of enjoying her WNBA fame and concentrating on her job, Caitlin Clark was living with the constant worry that a dangerous guy was watching her. That is nearly unthinkable in terms of mental strain. For this reason, the FBI and the court had to treat this matter seriously. Each letter served as a warning that fixation had reached a breaking point and a ticking time bomb. And this narrative is the unpleasant truth for everyone who believes that being a celebrity is only about fun and fame. Fans can accompany fame, but it can also draw those who use their adoration to become obsessed, and their fixation to commit crimes. It was more than just a court ruling when the punishment was handed down. It was a declaration. Michael Lewis received a prison term of 2.5 years. And that served as a wake-up call, as well as a victory for many. On the one hand, Caitlin Clark's admirers and supporters were relieved at last. Officially, the man who had made her life into a nightmare will be imprisoned. However, 2.5 years didn't seem like much considering the weeks of fear and the possible threat this man posed. The prison sentence was not the only thing the court considered. In order to ensure that Lewis would never again be able to approach Caitlin Clark, they added a number of stringent limitations. He was prohibited from going to any Indiana Pacers or Fever games. He was not allowed to go anywhere close to the home venues where Clark practices and performs, Gainbridge Fieldhouse and Hinkle Fieldhouse. He was instructed to avoid all communication with Caitlin Clark, including messages, calls, letters, and everything else. The judge also prohibited him from using the internet while he was serving his sentence to ensure he couldn't resume his online abuse. For viewers and commentators, these limitations made one thing very evident. This wasn't a small miscommunication. Since this was a full-fledged threat assessment case, police enforcement sought to block all avenues of communication between Lewis and Clark. However, this is where the public was first exposed to the scandal. Was this sufficient?
13 WTHR reported from the courtroom. While staying in a hotel in Indianapolis, Lewis bombarded Clark with messages on X, writing on December 27th that he had sensual feelings for Clark, and saying on December 31 that he was going to touch himself for her. Oh man. Look at this effing guy.
A guy was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for traveling to the city of a young woman he had tormented online, demonstrating his willingness to go beyond internet stalking to physical stalking. This sentence, according to some fans and observers, was too mild and did not adequately convey the danger and psychological pain that Lewis had inflicted. Others interpreted the punishment as a warning, a strong message to anyone considering harassing athletes, particularly female athletes. There are actual repercussions, and the law is keeping an eye on things. Social media discussions of whether stalking and harassment laws are robust enough to adequately safeguard well-known women were triggered by the sentence. The WNBA community is left feeling conflicted as Clark returns to the court. I'm relieved he's in jail, but I'm worried about what will happen if he does manage to escape. This whole story is more than just a sports story. It offers a glimpse into the sinister and unsettling realm of celebrity addiction. Not all trolls were Michael Lewis. He was a man who was completely deluded and thought he was having an illusory romance with Caitlin Clark. Just hearing that sentence ought to make anyone shudder. It serves as a terrifying warning that notoriety can draw unwarranted scrutiny. And occasionally, those who are disconnected from reality are the ones who give that attention. Lewis had obvious evidence of mental illness when he babbled about the end of the world in court. The prosecutors and judge weren't only looking to punish him. Because this was more than just illegal behavior, they also suggested mental health care. It has strong psychological underpinnings. This is where the conversation becomes awkward. How many popular personalities are silently experiencing similar nightmares? Caitlin Clark's story is well known due to her status as the WNBA's face and a budding superstar. However, there are innumerable other sportsmen, celebrities, and influencers that face abuse, threats, and stalkers that go unreported. The issue has only become worse thanks to social media, which provides devoted followers with a constant channel to their goals. The danger is significantly greater for female athletes. Female athletes are more likely to experience sexualized threats and personal harassment, according to studies and previous incidents. And a horrifying illustration of that reality is this case. The mental toll is what exacerbates it. Imagine attempting to concentrate on your work while you're always worried about if a threat is around or whether your phone will ring with another frightful message. Young and committed to her craft, Caitlin Clark is bearing the burden of serving as the league's face. That fear shouldn't be a part of her life. Lewis's mental state serves as a warning about how admiration can develop into obsession and, if left unchecked, how fixation can lead to criminal activity. The complexity of this case is reflected in the court's decision to impose mental health treatment in addition to the prison sentence. Public figures' safety, as well as the underlying mental health issues that contribute to these risky activities, must be addressed by society. There is more to this incident than the headline. It serves as both a wake-up call for the WNBA and a turning point for Caitlin Clark. Clark has broken ratings records, sold out arenas, and garnered previously unheard-of attention for women's basketball, making her the biggest story in the sport.
The Fever star was described as being, quote, very fearful and claimed to have changed her pattern of movement in public as a result. I have no doubt. Where was it that I just saw she made an appearance? And I swear she had like 6 bodyguards. As well she should. Nonetheless, Lewis claimed in court on Monday that he wants Clark to be, quote, oh, be safe.
She is more than a mere athlete. She is a sensation, a talent of the generation who is elevating the WNBA to a new level of prominence. However, a more somber reality accompanies that fame. Elevated danger. The WNBA and its players require strict security precautions, as the Caitlin Clark Stalker case makes clear. Male players in the NBA, NFL, or MLB have enjoyed a high degree of personal security for many years since they are aware that celebrity carries risks. The same degree of protection is now required rather than optional as women's sports gain popularity. For Clark in particular, this is a time of perseverance. She had experienced the kind of thing that may make anyone lose faith in themselves. She is anticipated to continue leading her squad and playing for a league that is growing while performing in front of the spotlight. Although supporters are supporting her, the league must also take action. Such incidents cannot be dismissed as fandom-related nonsense. They pose significant risks that call for significant solutions. Now is the time for the WNBA to establish the benchmark for player safety going forward. Will groups begin spending money on private security? Will leagues enhance their threat handling procedures? This instance might be the catalyst that turns those discussions into action. And let's face it, Caitlin Clark is even more of a symbol of strength because of her bravery in this situation. Her career was not hindered by her fear. She persisted. She gave the legal system the freedom to operate. She can now concentrate on her strongest suit, which is controlling the court. However, the message is obvious for both the league and its supporters. We cannot deny the existence of the negative aspects of celebrity. This case ought to lead to reforms that transform the WNBA into a league that safeguards its stars rather than merely being a league of stars.
It's going to take some rehabilitation to get to the right places, and I don't know if this guy can. He also said in his post that, quote, "My imagination was getting away from me and that the situation was like a game of telephone." Game of telephone? He reportedly ranted on war, Jesus, the economy, as well in what he described as a bizarre scene. Jesus. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.